Mhm. School can be a very hard time in a child's life. It's a time in their life when they're discovering how the world works and how society works, and they're also learning about themselves and what makes them them. And one of the most popular ways that people decide to express themselves is through their clothing. And this can be these expressions can come from many forms, from material possessions to specific music genres and different internet circles. But one of the most popular forms, like I said, is expression through one's clothing. Now, expression through clothing can come from many styles, from more punk rebellious styles to stuff that's a lot more fashionable. And this self-expression is crucial to a child's development because it allows them to develop a sense of self-character, and it allows them to build themselves up, basically. Now, you can probably imagine how boring it would be every day if all of us were wearing the same cookie cutter clothes, white polos, navy jeans, maybe a skirt. Nothing too simple, nothing fancy. But according to a study done in 2018, at least 20% of public schools require strict school clothing. And you may be asking, why are school uniforms such a big deal? Don't they allow students to have a more equal playing field when it comes to the type of clothing that they wear, and it might stop fighting? And while yes, this might be true for some cases, a lot of times school uniforms have more negative effects than positive. School uniforms oftentimes restrict a student's right to self-expression. School uniforms oftentimes promote conformity among students. School uniform regulations often infringe on a student's right to self-expression, and school uniforms often emphasize the socioeconomic divisions that they're supposed to eliminate. One of the many things that comes up in our history class is about how people express themselves and how them doing so impacted the history of the United States. We're all taught this in school, but don't you think it's just a little hypocritical that a teacher can go and teach us that and then go tell a group of students that they have to wear a school uniform because they're not allowed to express themselves? It's kind of hypocritical. According to an article by Madison Park for the BaltimoreSun.com, according to an article, students believe that mandatory uniforms is just the first step to a non-individual society, where people are just carbon cut from the same piece of cloth. Senior Troy Schumann believes that the ultimate equalizer for social diversity is regulation through school attire. And if a school starts at attire, what's stopping them from making even more drastic decisions in the future based on, the things that we like and the things that we identify with? If we were all forced to wear uniforms, the world would be a very drab and boring place. But it's a sad reality that all of us would face if we were forced to wear school uniforms. Now, some schools have kind of ridiculous uniform regulations. Some have a lot more strict than others. We here at AL are pretty lucky that we have some, pretty relaxed school, clothing regulations. But a lot of times, the rules that some schools put in place actually infringe on a student's basic amendment rights. The First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, prohibiting free exercise of religion, speech, press, and self-expression. And one of the most famous cases of this happening is actually in a local Iowa school. All of you probably already know about this, but the Tinker versus Des Moines case. The synopsis of this case, so Let me paint you a picture. It's in the 60s. Everybody's, fortunate son's playing on the radio all the time, and everybody's down at the malt shop getting some ice cream. This is one of the times when the U.S. was at a clear 50-50 divide between the current political climate, which was the Vietnam War. A lot of people were either on one side for fighting the war, and on the other side for trying to end the war and create a peace treaty. And it just so happened that on a fateful day, a group of students decided to get together and create armbands to show that they wanted to stop the war. Very simple, peaceful protest armbands. They were black and they had a tiny little peace sign on them. Now, the two people you probably remember most from this case was Mary Beth Tinker and Christopher Egghardt. These two students in specific got suspended from school and didn't end up returning for a long time due to the belief that they felt their rights had been infringed, and their parents actually sued the school, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the court ruled that it was in the school's decision to decide what their punishment was for wearing these, but this is just an example of how how clothing regulations can infringe on a person's basic human right, which I'm pretty sure that's, never mind. On top of all these reasons, school uniforms can actually cause an emphasis on socioeconomic diversity among lower income schools. A lot of times these schools will use school uniforms so that they may cut costs for the actual building and for the students and for their education. But even after everybody's given a school uniform, it only takes a couple of months for those differences to start appearing again. Going back to the Baltimore Sun article that I mentioned earlier, sociology professional David Brunsma states that affluent families who live in areas with places that have school uniforms, more affluent families tend to purchase more uniforms per person as opposed to people who aren't as well off as they are. And this can show up in their clothing because families who aren't able to afford as many pairs of school uniforms often end up with tattered and rugged and worn out clothing a couple months into the school year, while other kids might have pristine, crisp clothing that looks like it's never had a stain on it. All right. In conclusion, while school uniforms might level the playing field for students in a school, it promotes a sense of conformity among students that doesn't allow for any creativity whatsoever. It infringes on a student's basic right to expression, and it also can cause major division within socioeconomic parts of a school district. Personally, I'm really, really against school uniforms. I feel very fortunate that I've never had to wear one. I'm very against the idea of conformity, and I think that a world where everybody is forced to wear I think that a world where everybody would be forced to wear super uncomfortable polos, gaudy navy pants, and really frilly knee-high skirts that just don't look good. School uniforms never look good. You can take my joggers and my hoodie and my sneakers right out of my cold dead hands before you'll find me wearing a school uniform. And that's it.